This is the People's Authority, and today we're going to discuss why trusts are the shield of a de jure government. Now, if you're going to restore a republic, you need more than passion. You need structure, you need protection, you need a strategy that aligns with law, principle, and divine order. Because there's a cold calculating system in place that's been running the show for generations. A system that doesn't recognize your convictions. A system that operates by fiction, not by truth. It's the de facto government. It's the corporation. See, it looks like law. It sounds like authority. And it acts like it owns everything. But it doesn't operate by right. It operates by presumption. And if you walk into that system talking about liberty and freedom and sovereignty or restoring the republic, but you don't know how to protect what you're building, you're more or less walking into a lion's den without armor. That's why we have to talk about trust. Now, I'm not the expert on trust. We have a man by the name of Robert Kraft who is aligned with his organization as a representative of an organization called Our United Republic. And he is the authority and the expert when it comes to trust. Now, what I'm going to explain here is just what I understand of it thus far. But that is exactly why we need to talk about trust, not as a loophole, not as a financial tool, but as a lawful shield, as a biblical model, a legal structure, a spiritual fortress of sorts. See, a trust is what separates sacred ground from occupied territory, is the best way that I can explain it and how I understand it. And if you're serious about rebuilding the republic here in America, you have to understand why it's essential. The first reason is you need to forget what you think you know about trust. Number one, okay, we're going to talk about what a trust actually is. It's not about taxes, it's not about estate planning, but most importantly, it's about jurisdiction. A trust is a structure where one party, the grantor, entrusts property, rights, or authority to a trustee who manages it for the benefit of others, the beneficiaries. But in the highest form, it's more than just legal mechanics. It's a covenant of sorts. It's a declaration that this property, this mission, this assembly, doesn't belong to one individual or a couple individuals. It belongs to a purpose. It's not a personal possession, it's a stewardship. And that's the pattern that you find from the book of Genesis leading all the way up to the Gospels. God gave man dominion, not ownership, but dominion over the entire earth. He gave it in trust, stewardship under command. And that pattern is mirrored in the very foundations of lawful government. And it's the model that we must return to if we want our efforts to stand. Now, the second point I want to bring up is why the de facto system can't be ignored. Here's where most people fail. They think they can just declare themselves free and start operating in original jurisdiction without accounting for the legal landscape around them. That's not how that works. And I am now myself beginning to understand that the more I talk to, or listen, I should say, to Robert Kraft. I had a few opportunities to ask him some questions on a conference call, but this is what the basic understanding that I have based off of what I've been listening to Robert Kraft from his videos. Now, the de facto system is built like a trap. Surprise, surprise. Everything is presumed to be under control: your name, your land, your property, your labor. But here's the thing: your silence is consent, your participation means submission, and your ignorance means incompetence. And look, I was in the same boat too. And if you act without clear separation, the system just swallows you up. That's the game. But a private trust, operating under common law or biblical canon law, puts a wall between what you're building and what you claim to govern. I hope so far this makes sense. And if it does, I would suggest hitting the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and share this material with other people in other states, because with the Michigan General Jural Assembly being the recognized official model by the military, we're going to be moving at breakneck speeds now to help other states and counties assemble properly, lawfully. Now, when you have a private trust, it says that this is not yours. It's not subject to your statutes. It's not governed by the corporation's codes. It stands under a higher law. And that's how you stay protected while restoring the republic. Now, the third point I want to bring up: trust breaks presumptions and restores jurisdiction. So let's make this very plain. The only reason the de facto system has control over most people is because they never rebut the presumptions. They never rebut the presumptions. And the system assumes everything is commercial. Everything is part of a corporate structure. So when you form a republic, or I should say, when you restore a republic via assembly or reclaim land for lawful governance without a trust, it's presumed to be rogue political action within their system. And that's dangerous. But when you form a trust and that trust holds the land, the meeting space, the documents, and the mission, well, then you've broken their chain of presumption. You've taken it out of their jurisdiction. You're no longer acting as a commercial citizen or a civilian. You're operating as a trustee of sacred rights. And that's power. Because now, even if they knock on your door and you don't answer as a person, you speak as a fiduciary of a lawful trust, bound to serve its purpose with honor. And that's a position they cannot easily attack, because it's not personal, it's lawful, it's private, and it's rooted in original, God-given jurisdiction. Now, the fourth point I want to bring up is you cannot restore the republic without asset protection. So let's talk about something kind of concrete here. Say you're rebuilding your township assembly, right, in your county, and you reclaim the land, you acquire historical records, you gather equipment and donations, and you draft your foundational documents that gives you teeth. But whose name is on that title? Who owns the land? Who holds the property? If the answer is you've just made yourself the target. Now, one signature, one lien, one court order, and everything you've built can be taken just like that. But when a properly formed private trust holds that land, there is no one person to sue, no name to target, and no asset to seize. Why? Because the trust exists outside the jurisdiction of the de facto state. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the mission. And the mission is bigger than any one man. That's what it means to protect sacred ground. That's what it means to build a republic on solid footing. You can't build a house on sand. It will crumble away. You have to build it on rock. And again, that's biblical. Now, point number 5, speaking of biblical, don't think that this is a legal trick, because it's not. See, this is as old as the covenant itself. God made covenants with man, with nations, with tribes, and in every case, it was a trust structure. See, he gave land to Israel, not for ownership, but for stewardship. The Levites didn't own the land. They held it in trust for the people and the service of the sanctuary. Even a new covenant is a trust. Christ, the grantor, gave his life to establish a new trust, with the apostles as the trustees and the church as the beneficiaries. It was sealed with blood, and that trust carries on today, eternally binding. You think the de jure republic should be different in any way? See, another question I would ask is, do you think that land rights and self-government should be owned by private individuals? See, that's not restoration. That's called vulnerability, if you let that happen. And true restoration means returning to the original structure, God's structure, the covenant, stewardship, sacred trust. The sixth point I want to bring up: trust provides a safe harbor to gather and govern. Here's where this gets practical. When you gather under a de facto lens as residents or citizens or activists, you're subject to every statute and code they throw at you. You need permits, you're open to surveillance, you risk being labeled and infiltrated. But when your assembly operates under a private, ecclesiastical, or lawful trust, none of that applies. Now you can understand why there's been so much infiltration over the last several years in various state assemblies. We've seen it here a couple times over here in Michigan. And guess what? We're done with that because we figured out the secret sauce, which is why we are the model for other states to follow. But again, when your assembly operates under a private, ecclesiastical, or lawful trust, none of that applies. You're not a public entity. You're not commercial. You're not political. You're private. You're lawful. And you're protected. Very important. See, the trust gives you structure. It gives you lawful standing. It gives you peace in the storm. And that's how you rebuild a republic in the middle of an empire, without confrontation, without compromise, and without collapse, or splitting, or division, or infiltration. The seventh point I want to make is competence is very much required in this case. This is not for the careless. And let's be honest, most people playing with trust don't know what they're doing. I don't know what I would be doing, which is why we have a man like Robert Kraft. They download templates, they cut and paste, and they think paperwork alone can save them. That's a huge mistake. A trust must be lawfully formed, spiritually rooted, and competently administered. And if you treat it like a loophole, it will fall apart. If you misuse it for personal gain, it will be pierced. But if you form it with reverence, if you understand your role as a trustee of freedom and liberty, you're walking in the shoes of the founders, the prophets, and the righteous stewards of every generation. Competence isn't optional. Honor is not negotiable. You are building something that must be endured for generations. That's why we have to do this for our posterity. And the quality of your trust reflects the strength of your republic. The eighth point I want to talk about is the time is now. Restore the republic with shielded structures. I want you to look around for a moment. The corporation is collapsing. We see evidence of that day in and day out. We do have a continuity of government under the military. The currency is corrupt. The courts are weaponized. But that's not the end. It's the opportunity, because when false systems fail, trust and true order must rise. And that's the call right now that we're making here. It's not to resist with violence. It's not to beg for permission, but to rebuild what was lost with wisdom, with order, with trust. Land in trust, assemblies in trust, missions in trust, documents in trust, families in trust, held not in your name, but in a sacred covenant, shielded from interference, grounded in law, and governed by conscience. So, to wrap this up, to kind of give a concluding thought here, you have to step into stewardship. This is where theory ends and duty begins. If you believe in restoring the de jure republic, and if you want to reclaim the soil and the soul and the sovereignty of your people, then you must embrace the mantle of stewardship. Learn the structure, understand the law, honor the covenant, and form the trust that will protect this work when this storm hits. Because it will, and when it does, you'll be ready. Not as a rebel, not as a runaway, but as a lawful trustee of righteous mission for a republic that never died. It only slumbered. And now is the time to rise and build it lawfully.